welcome to today's session. Risk prioritization is key to cloud security success, how to automate alerts with Orca Security and PagerDuty. My name is Keith Mokris with product marketing at Orca Security, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Franklin Mosley, head of security at PagerDuty. Franklin, thanks so much for being here today.
Hey, thank you for having me, Keith. It's a pleasure to be with you. Glad we can do this talk and talk about some of the things that we're facing in dealing with alerts and security.
Awesome. Today we've got a great agenda, in this 20-minute session where we'll be talking about cloud alert fatigue data and how it impacts many different organizations, then how SecOps and DevOps teams can partner to address risks in the cloud, and then ultimately how Orca Security and PagerDuty integrate and partner to help organizations deliver some great outcomes in cloud security. So let's dig in. First, we want to highlight some of the data that was surfaced in Orca Security's 2022 Alert Fatigue Report, where we pulled 800 different practitioners across DevOps, cloud platform architecture, and security and SecOps teams to ask them about how they're dealing with alerts in the cloud. And if you are part of one of these teams at the organization, I don't think the data will be too surprising to you, but it does illustrate a lot of different challenges organizations are facing. First and foremost, organizations said that they're dealing with a lot of challenging alerts, oftentimes many that are inaccurate, causing them to spend a lot of time figuring out what alerts are accurate and how they can ultimately address these alerts. So a majority of respondents, 59%, said they receive more than 500 cloud security alerts a day. 56% say they spend more than 20% of their day prioritizing their alerts. So before they can start solving problems, they need to understand what problems should I be solving. Secondly, organizations said that this impacts their alert fatigue and how they feel as an organization. And this has to do with turnover of their security teams and a lot of friction, which is important as we think about security partnering across the organization to deal with a lot of these alerts. And then finally, 55% of respondents said that they're missing critical alerts, often weekly and even daily. And Franklin, I think this is a great time for you to chime in as you lead, a growing security team. How do you react to this data? And is it something that you're dealing with in, your team?
Oh, well, it's very accurate. I'll say that I started my career in the days before the cloud. But now within the cloud, there are a lot of different challenges that we have to face. The cloud is actually the gift and the curse. As we start down this path of DevOps and we learn how to automate and we're able to deploy tools faster, deploy code faster, deploy infrastructure faster. We gave our developers a lot of tools and processes, allowed them to take ownership and to do these things. And own their services from ideation to implementation to deployment and operation. But as a security person, that also gives you pause because now you don't really have a handle on your environment, what's existing within your environment, what things you need to protect, what things do you need to monitor and observe. And we started putting a lot of controls in place to be able to do these things, but at the same time, they can also produce a lot of noise, and then at the same time, alert fatigue. So it's a very real stat that your study is telling us, and it's something my team has had to deal with. And we had to figure out what really matters, what are the true signals that we want to separate from the noise, what are the things that we really want to get alerts on and take action on, and what things do we need to take action on very quickly versus something that we can react to in a more passive manner. So those are real things, and I think that your study is very accurate.
And I think that's a good segue as we unpack some more data on this next slide, where you talked a lot about how development and DevOps teams are really driving this shift to the cloud and a lot of the different tech stacks and technologies that are growing today. So you've got not only cloud VMs, but you've got Kubernetes, managed Kubernetes, on-demand container or serverless platforms where you're operating your applications in a very event-driven way. Then we've got other technologies like infrastructure as code and new CI/CD tools that are constantly evolving to allow these teams to build and deploy more and more quickly. And our study definitely highlighted the fact that a lot of organizations are using many different cloud providers. They have a lot of different security tools. And one of the major challenges was they have a lot of false positives that they're dealing with. So, as we mentioned, before you deal with a risk, you need to know that it's something you really need to address. And I think this sets the stage for you to comment on what are some of the day to day best practices you're implementing with your security team in working across the organization to address risks?
Yeah, Keith. So you mentioned alert fatigue, and that's a very real thing. It's something that my teams have suffered from. Um, One of the things that I would recommend is as you're rolling out new tools, as you're rolling out tools to monitor your cloud environment, to observe, as you're logging from your tooling and then alerting on events that are occurring within those logs, is to make sure that the alerts that are coming out of the tooling is actionable. Um, by producing a lot of alerts with no real actions that could be taken, you're definitely subjecting your team to alert fatigue. So, one of the things I would recommend is that as you roll out these tools, as you roll out these security controls, that you start out small and slowly build upon that, making sure that as you are increasing the capabilities of the tools to monitor your environment, to observe your environment, that the things that you are alerting on are actually true positives and are actionable in nature. So by doing that, you're not subjecting your team to the alert fatigue, which leads to burnout. And I've seen that very, very often firsthand within the teams that I've been on.
And I think this allows us to kind of build on that and talk about how Orca Security and PagerDuty actually integrate to help security teams address a lot of these issues that you're talking about and ultimately shift to that best practices model. So, for people who aren't familiar with Orca Security, we're a multi cloud security platform built around an agentless architecture. So, you don't have to deploy any agents, sidecars, or scanners in order to get information about your environment. And we're able to look at workloads, your data, and a lot of other important information from the APIs, flow logs, audit logs, and information we're able to capture and automatically feed that into solutions like PagerDuty for alert remediation. And a lot of customers tell us that they send P1 alerts, for example, like a major malware infection in their cloud environment, to PagerDuty, where it's something they want to respond to in a time measured in an hourly type of framework, where they might have other, moderate vulnerabilities or important but not critical misconfigurations that they're going to send to other ticketing, alerting, or kind of aggregation or automated response systems. And I think this is a great time to kind of ask, Franklin, with you and your teams, how do you respond to P1 alerts when those come across your desk or your laptop?
Well, for us, when my team receives a P1 alert, it's something that means that we need to respond very quickly. We have a team SLA of about no more than 5 minutes to respond to the P1 alert. In our world, a P1 alert means that there is a potential threat actor inside of our environment. It could be assets or resources that are configured in a way which puts us at risk and puts our customer data at risk. And when we receive those P1 alerts, we have to quickly act and be able to quickly identify what is the issue and how we can quickly remediate it as well. So P1s are something that we deal with, and it's something that we have a workflow for addressing. And we make sure that the things that matter to us the most are dealt with the utmost of urgency and are classified as a P1. So this could be things such as a S3 bucket that's exposed publicly on the internet, potentially may have sensitive data in it that we do not want anyone to have access to. It could be an alert that lets us know that one of our accounts and some resources within that account are configured in a way which we deem to be risky in nature, and we need to quickly act to be able to either isolate that resource or remove it from our cloud environment, or to have it reconfigured in a way that puts the proper controls in place to reduce the risk on that particular resource. So P1s are a critical part of our operational, our security operations, and we have workflows to deal with that.
And I think one of the things as we were preparing for this talk, we talked about the role automation plays in addressing notable alerts and effective incident response. And in this window here, I showed how you can configure alert automations in the Orca platform to feed deep information to PagerDuty for those P1 type of alerts. So here, for example, we're surfacing a query at the top where we looked at there's some sort of malware compromise on a workload or application, and we've already pre-configured PagerDuty to send that information to PagerDuty. But in the instance you described, Franklin, if we had like an exposed S3 bucket, that's something we can granularly describe as well and send that information right into PagerDuty to help people, really address that right away, because that's definitely something I would classify as a P1 type of alert. And one of the things, that you were talking about, commenting on, is how does automation feed into all of this? And how do you see automation providing a lot of benefits to organizations?
Well, automation provides a lot of benefits. We talked earlier about how do you maintain the health of your on-call team? Well, one is alert fatigue by addressing alert fatigue. And one way you can address alert fatigue outside of making sure that you have properly configured your tooling to provide true signals to events that are occurring within your environment that you need to address, making sure those alerts are actionable. But in addition to that, automation can also play a part in reducing the number of times that your team, the humans, have to actually interact with an event that's occurring. And you can use automation to take the place of that, either doing some more upfront triaging and information gathering of the incident to give more context and additional information for the human to then act on, or automation from the standpoint of actually making a change within the environment to actually remediate the issue. So the example we were talking about with the S3 bucket, that could be dealt with potentially via automation. If a bucket is known to have been exposed, be a public read or public write, automation could be put in place to actually identify that bucket through the context information that's provided from an integration between Orca and PagerDuty, and use that context information to then go act on that bucket to change the permissions, to change it from publicly readable or writable to being private. So automation could help save time that your security team, your humans, have to use to interact, act on these events. And automation can also save you from alert fatigue because they're not being alerted on things that could be done or handled via automation.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a great way to wrap it up here, in our 20-minute session, where I hope everyone's benefited from, thinking about cloud risks and alert fatigue in a new way, best practices they can consider bringing into their organization, and how organizations and tools like Orca Security can bring in that context to PagerDuty. And I'm super grateful for Franklin for joining me as part of today's session.
Thank you for having me, Keith.